What's happening, guys? Welcome to another episode of Indie Invasion, brought to you by CoastalCon. I am here today with a couple of special guests, but as usual, I have with me my partner in crime. Say hello, partner in crime.
Hey guys, how's it going out there?
All right, sucking the brains out of the Cthulhu cup, acting like
souls.
It's coffee.
There's souls in there.
Souls in there. Okay, and what I have with us today, I have Adam from Invisible Hand Studios. Say hi, Adam.
What's going on, everybody?
And Adam is our resident painter down in Fayetteville at Discover Games. He does a whole bunch of painting for Alan, which we all think is unfair because Alan owns the store. So he bribes Adam to paint by giving him stuff. So not fair for the rest of us because we have to pay for Adam's services. But
he allows me to use this awesome room that we're working on to renovate and turn into a room for bat reps, painting videos, anything and everything.
Awesome. And he also, if you want to check him out, he has a Facebook page. You can go check out Invisible Hand Studios, and he's also doing some videos for Discover Games on their YouTube channel. And then we also have with us Tanya, who is up in my neck of the woods, here up in Beaufort, and she is an amazing painter, but has recently come over to painting our little tiny plastic soldiers that we know and love so well. So what we're going to do today is Eric has an art degree. Adam is a master painter. Tanya is a master painter. I don't know. Do you have an art degree as well?
I do not have an art degree, actually, and I have a very limited amount of, people who I call professional artists. Okay. So if you make money out of art, you are a professional artist.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes
it's limited, but it's also, very liberating in that term. So I sell art in galleries. People, pay hard cold cash. People who don't know me, or who are not my, sisters, brothers, or friends. So this is how I came to be a person who makes a living out of it.
Awesome. Okay. And she, like I said, has recently come over to painting tiny plastic soldiers, which there are a few of them. If you'd like to see some of the pictures, you can check out the Beaufort Tabletop Gaming group, or you can check out our CoastalCon group. She has been posting pics over there at my request, and I am the non-painter of the group. I have no artistic skill. I am here to take notes and listen. That is my job today. So Eric's going to be running most of this discussion because you can, if you're watching this video and not listening on the podcast, he has a giant stack of how to paint stuff books right there.
I raided the library last night.
And he's probably read them, whereas I would probably have them under the edge of a table to hold something up.
Or if people come over, they could think, oh, wow, Mac is very cultured in his knowledge.
Exactly. So, Eric, why don't you take it away? Get us started, bud.
All right. Well, I thought something to start with would be to maybe just talk a little bit about concepts of color theory and the basics. And I mean, there's a lot of different things when you talk about color theory. I mean, the obvious one, the first one is the color wheel, which anybody that's a painter or some kind of artist, Mac's got one that you can, little simple thing you can pick up to help you just look at how colors relate to each other, whether they're complementary or if they're contrary. Some of the other things we can talk about, well, complementary, basically it's colors that kind of go together well. They could be, red and blue. They kind of sit well next to each other. So these are just ideas to think about when you're kind of picking out your colors. And then of course we have neutral colors. We could talk about the value of colors, which basically is from, a darker red, you mix in some white to it, going all the way to a pinkish color. And then my favorite concept is temperature. I love talking about temperature of colors.
How convenient during COVID, right?
Yeah. I mean, temperature is, you hear cool colors and warm colors, and it's supposed to kind of get a feeling from the artwork, whether it's a 2D or a 3D. Do you want something to be bright and vibrant? You're going to do it those warm colors, the reds and yellows. Or if you want to be kind of, like a brooding kind of dark figure, you know, maybe he's an evil type thing. You want to do like your blues and purples just to kind of have that feeling of dread. So these kind of ideas, color and you know, your temperature can invoke a certain feeling, you know, in your artwork. And then the last thing, of course, would be contrast colors. So, I mean, what do you guys think about these kind of, are these, what do you guys, I guess, look at when you're doing artwork in general?
Adam?
Well, I think typically I've been painting lately for skirmish type games. It's a limited figure base. You're not painting it for an army, so I can treat each character as an individual. And if I'm doing commission work, I want to find out, okay, are you cool with me doing it in my preference, or do you have a color base that you want to go off of? Do you prefer the main color for this group to be red? If I'm going to do my own thing, I'm going to do what I think is visually appealing. I typically like to do things in more of a desaturated, like a darker sort of, to invoke despair. I don't know. I really like to paint things in the horror style, things that are really dirty and kind of grimy. So I'm going to stay away from like the bright greens and the bright blues and the aquamarines, and favor more of the desaturated purples with like a red shadow. Or if I do green, it's going to be not necessarily as bright green. It's going to be a dirty, dingier color.
Okay, more of a like a neutral type color.
Or even leaning to the cold side.
Okay.
So,
you know,
let me interject something real quick before we jump over to Tanya to answer this question as well. And that's this, is there's a lot of art terminology, and most painters for miniatures games, they're not going to be familiar with it. I've been painting since the early 90s, and I don't know, I know some of them, but I don't know all of them. So for the sake of people listening, if you throw out one of those big words, try to attach a bit of a definition to it to dumb it down for me. And that way, as I'm taking notes, I know when I read back through it, I won't go, I have no idea what that means. So if you kind of keep that in mind as we talk, because it's really cool to watch you guys paint stuff. I've played against Eric's stuff. I've seen your stuff. You've painted stuff for me, Adam. And I really think kind of the coolest thing that I've seen happen, and what I was most excited about with this little talk that we were going to do, is watching you, Tanya, transition from, like you had mentioned this earlier, Eric, that 2-dimension to the 3-dimensional model, and to go from basically your first model didn't look like my first model did. Let's just say that. Now, mind you, you weren't using tester enamel paints and a big giant white right, like I was back in the 90s, but you didn't go, I didn't see that first model thing. So anyway, I just wanted to interject that, and sorry for interrupting your question there, Eric, if you want to reiterate it a little bit, unless you remember it, Tanya, because I don't.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, to me, it's exciting, Tanya, that like for you coming from the 2D to the 3D, you know, what are some of those basic color theory concepts that you're still using and applying to 2D? I mean, or to 3D. I remember when I was getting into miniature painting, you know, and I still do the 2D art, but that transition of the flat versus 3D, and it's always a struggle, but those concepts you can still use.
Right. And I feel that a lot of these concepts can transition from one area of knowledge to the art to a 3D. And however, miniature painting industry being rather a hobby than an industry, than a craft, it has its specifics. For example, there is a lot of premixed paints. There are special paints that you're supposed to use to shade your miniatures or highlight your miniatures. And that gives specific limitation to a person who wants to approach it as an artist, because you don't have pigments that you used to work with. Instead, you have thousands and thousands of colors from different manufacturers that are pre-mixed and that are made for your convenience. And at the same time, I feel it takes away a lot of freedom from a person. It does a lot of complications for people who just getting into it, because you're supposed to, out of a sudden, you're supposed to buy like a million jars of paints, and you know, each one for each task.
See them all behind Mac.
I feel that the biggest problem with that is color is suffering, because people just take, I don't know, Null Oil, you know, black wash from Citadel, and just create every single shadow and every single miniature with it. And this breaks my heart, because, you know, there is no such thing as black color in the nature to begin with. You don't really see it. And this is how we come across a miniature that does not look natural. And the painter did a great job. They tried, you know, all they could. They tried to, you know, do their paint job as best as they could. But because they don't really understand that they don't have to have black for shadows and whiter for highlights, because of that, their miniatures don't look as well as they could have been. I came across that if I mix a proper highlighting color, I don't need to do clean job with highlighting. And I think it's like one of the most, you know, complicated topics in the miniature painting, to create this, you know, clean, crisp highlights. If your color that you're highlighting with on point, if it's proper value, that's not too different. And if it's a proper, within a proper gradient, so it's not just whiter version of a color, it's warmer, it's closer to yellow because, you know, there's like sunlight. Or if it's ambient light, it's closer to the color of your light. And this way, even if you do a lousy paint job, your miniature will still look very good and very clean. And I thought that, you know, how can I explain to people who don't have the instrumentarium of pigments to, you know, be able to operate the color with, you know, even the pre-mixed paints. So because of that, I wanted to teach a free class for the local community on color theory, and explain these basic terms that Matt was talking about, so we can like operate with the same language, and also how to use this color theory in practice to explain how light behaves in different lighting situations, like when it's dark, we only have values. When we have full light, we have full spectrum of colors, and how to make proper color gradients. So I wanted to teach that, and also wanted, you know, to test myself as a teacher, basically.
Okay.
I would be good in explaining things like that.
Well, having had maybe possibly a sneak peek at the lesson plan for that, let me just say that the lesson plan looks really good. I'm excited about it. I'm going to go. I probably won't learn anything, but that's because of me, not because of your teaching. But speaking to the prepackaged paints, Tanya, my painting about 3 years ago really changed because I discovered from someone else exactly what you're talking about with the using those pigments instead of all of these. And I still use these because I paint 5,000 models, and sometimes that's just easier to do. But it was actually a guy we did an interview with recently, Eric Bouchard, the creator of Deep Wars. And he actually has a free PDF. I think it might be $2 or $3, but it's a PDF on painting. And that's all he uses too. He does not use any of the prepackaged paints. And his stuff is stunning. And he does it really fast because of, I guess, the limited, you know, he's not opening 14 different bottles of paint and using all of
shaking them up and stirring them up. And
yeah, so he's really limiting. And when I started adopting some of what he did, not all, but picked, you know, kind of cherry picked what I liked and what was easy for me, my painting, I noticed the stuff that you were talking about. I saw an improvement in my painting because of the colors, not necessarily because of the brush strokes per se, but just because of the color itself. So I think that's a really great point, and I'm excited about it. And even though you live 18 hours away, Eric, you should come down for the class too.
Yeah, come on.
Adam, you're not far enough away to have an excuse not to be here. So
I'll be there.
And I mean, it doesn't have to have like that many years for a person to come across this thing.
Yeah, a lot of these concepts, I think people can naturally come to just from repetitive working on stuff, and eventually your eye gets naturally trained to what works, what looks good, what balances itself. I mean, Adam, you said earlier that you don't have like official training in these things, but when we look at your stuff, it's obviously you have that natural eye for what balances and and what colors work well with each other.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that. I just think of, okay, so is this miniature standing in the forest? If it's standing in the forest, is it standing in under a sunbeam? Okay. Or is the sun coming through the trees? Is it nighttime? Is it overcast? And two, you also have to look at your values. Where is the light going to be hitting? Say you have a shoulder pauldron. If
value meaning what? Value meaning what?
Value
is how dark the color is.
Yeah, it's your. So sometimes when I start with a mini, I don't have one in front of me. Let's take this bottle. If I'm going to be using this as an example, and I want my light source to be coming from right here, I'm going to know as a cylinder is going to take this light differently. Okay, it's going to be darker over here. It's going to be brighter over here. Light diffuses over a surface, so it's going to be the strongest at the most direct point, and it's going to diffuse. Being a cylinder, I have to know that my brightest values are going to be probably right here. As it diffuses and goes further around the cylinder, it's going to go away. Okay. So I have to think of, okay, is that a metallic texture? Is that going to be, if it's a shoulder pauldron, is it going to be worn? Or is it going to be like a leather shoulder pauldron? Because light diffuses differently over different surfaces. Right. So I wouldn't say this is like mastery, but it's just understanding, like light would diffuse differently over pants, over leather, over pouches, over a canvas shirt. And, you have to take that into consideration to do basic things. Like you're not just going to put a base coat on and like Tanya said, throw some Nuln oil on it.
Yes, I am.
Well,
yes, I am. You are not the boss of me. Yes, I am.
Your bet is you're welcome to do with them what you want.
Yeah. And I started out with no training. My brother came up one day and brought some 40K Eldar, and he's like, check these little things out. And my mind was blown. And I was just a canvas painter at the time, just a hobby canvas painter. And, I went through about a year or so of like base coating, wash. But then I wanted more because I didn't play with these things. I wanted to paint them better. Are they standing underneath a light that's coming up from below? Do they have glowing eyes that are casting magical flames? And I wanted to try to recreate that. And in recreating that, you have to understand your values. You have to understand light diffuses. You have to understand texture. And most importantly, to advance, you don't need necessarily a wash to do the work for you.
Right. If
you can understand how color, like say back to the shoulder pauldron, if it's moonlight, the light underneath it is going to be like a bluer color, because that would be the moon also in shadow. Everything is going to refract light, but it just depends on what shade it is. So
okay,
these are the things I've picked up. I would love to go to school and like find out if I'm actually for real or not.
Well, I think your painting holds up to whether or not you're for real. So, and if you say anything negative and disparage yourself, then I'm going to drive down to Atlanta and I'm going to slap you around.
Well,
or anybody that's listening that is near Atlanta, feel free to drive over to Discover Games and slap him around.
Well, I think Tanya said it best the other day, that it's natural for an artist to not want admonition for their own work. And naturally, and you two guys know, I'm naturally a shy person as it is anyway. But to take credit, I thank you. I appreciate it. I just got my wife tells me every day, you got to learn to take compliments, dude.
There you go. I knew we'd get you to that point.
All right. Well, so we were talking about objects, the lighting on this, and like, I like that approach to thinking almost like a story of that character. Like
Right.
where is he in this moment? And, you know, what is his environment? That's a good way to think about how they're going to be colored, really. One of the things I wanted to jump into is basic mini painting priming. So we start at priming, and there's always that debate. People do it different colors. Mac, you do white. I like black. And it's one of those things. It's the start of how do you want that mini to look? Do you, you know, you would use white, obviously, because you want those bright, vibrant colors, and black because you want kind of that foreboding feel to it. What do you guys think about the whole priming? You know, starting from
White.
scratch.
White,
like white,
obviously.
Tanya?
Yeah, white, zenithal. I personally use Games Workshop Wraithbone because I use a lot of contrast in my work. I'm
Okay.
lazy. I like contrast do most of the work for me, but, you know, then spend all of my energy on, you know, painting small details.
Okay.
I feel because, first of all, acrylic paints are transparent.
Mm-hmm.
And that transparency means that everything that's undercoat is going to affect your color. And so if you're painting yellow over black, your yellow will always look green because black makes everything colder, especially if you start mixing, you know, just straight black paint to yellow, you will get these olive shades that kind of appear green to the eye. And black will make all of your colors colder. It will take a lot of control from you. If you don't want saturated bright colors, just don't paint with saturated bright colors. But I feel that black will affect your colors, will take control from you as a painter, and it will affect how your model looks in the finish, because you just can't cover it completely. It will still shine through because you know the acrylic paint still has the transparent properties to it.
Adam, what do you think about priming?
Depends on my end result. So
Okay.
for something that I'm going to be painting with metallic paints, always a black, just simply because transparent paint, metallics, sometimes 4, 5, 6 coats later, if you're over certain shades, it's not going to work. It's going to get gummy, you know, it's going to get thick and chunky. If I'm painting something that's like a non-metallic metal, I'm going to prime close to the mid-tone. So when I think of schemes for how I want my end result, I think of my shade, my mid-tone, and my highlight. Okay. If I want something that's going to be darker, I may not prime black, but a dark blue. And there's my built-in shade already in. And I can go straight over it with my mid-tone and feather towards my highlight or blend towards my highlight. Typically, to check for my values, I'll zenithal prime, which is, you know, black, white ink from above. Sometimes I'll hand sketch it on. And basically hand sketching is the same things or similar to zenithal priming. You just take your figure and you hand sketch your own values in. Sometimes if you have 2 light sources or opposing light sources, hand sketching would be the way to go, just because you can concentrate it more. Like if I want a light to be coming from below and a light coming from above, if you airbrush both of those, they could have a similar value. Whereas if you hand sketch it, you can choose how skinny or thin you want your values to be.
So hand sketching, what define that for me, because you're
so,
you're over there speaking Chinese to me.
So if I got my phone right here and this is my miniature, and I want a light source here and a light source here, opposing light sources. Say I got the moon and a campfire. Okay. The moon is not going to be as bright as the campfire because the campfire is a brighter source of light and it's closer. Right. So say I would take a dark gray, cover the whole thing in dark gray. I would hit the points of light with a white or an almost white with my brush, making like where I would want the flicker or the flame to be the brightest. Right. So with the moon, it would be maybe softer up here off of the shoulders or off of the ear or off of the helmet. And it wouldn't be as broad of strokes as the fire that's the hotter source of light closer.
And again, so that's really playing into what you were talking about, Tanya, with the transparency of acrylic paints then, because
It will show, yes, it will show through in your final work. It will affect how your colors look. So if you already built in the values before you applied any colors,
Mhm.
you know, your bright colors will look brighter, your neutrals would look brighter on white, and they will look more muted on darker areas. That's
Exactly. So, like in that instance, if I were to sketch it in, um, like what Tanya said, so I was sketching for my fire, and this is what I call the ugly phase, because if you look at it, or if anybody looks at it before it gets to the final result, you're like, oh no, that's horrible.
I
But
paid you how much to paint this for me? I think that's No Hand Studios, not Invisible Hands.
And so for like fire, I would come in with a warm brown, and then that would be my undertone for my red. Okay, so for the moon coming in, I would do a colder black. And then I could look at it, and typically I'll take a picture of it with my phone, and I'll turn that picture black and white. Okay. And I turn that picture black and white to see if my values are matching correctly, because you can take a picture of anything, any miniature or any painting, and you turn it black and white. And if you can read your values correctly, your brightest brights will always look white. Your darkest darks will always look black.
That's a good tip. That's a real good tip
Yeah.
for anybody that's trying to figure out, well, how do I show that?
Mhm.
Take a picture, make it black and white.
Yep.
And I think
it's always helped me.
I think the real value in this, the stuff that you guys are saying, because like everything you're saying is, I'm processing it, I'm putting it in there. But but here's the thing about it is, I'm not going to use all of that, because my goal, my end result goal that I want when I put my stuff on the table is I want a whole terrain set up and the models painted with the 3-foot rule. You know, my model looks just as good at 3 feet away as a Golden Demon model does, because you're 3 feet away from it and the model is, you know, 28 millimeters tall. But there, I think everybody, no matter what skill level they are in miniature painting, has that 1 or 2 model in their collection that they want to use all of these techniques on. Because for you guys, like for you guys, Eric is, as he likes to always say, very anal about his painting. So he takes a long time. Adam, you just make us sick because you make it look good and you don't take very long. And Tanya, I don't know how long you're taking, but if you're only taking a short time too, you make me sick as well. Are you doing
so what I do is I dump the entire model into contrast paint. I wait for it to dry, and then I draw like maybe 2 things.
So you're doing them fast too, aren't you?
Yeah.
Oh man.
And if I can't do it fast, I just don't not enjoy it, and I don't want to do it.
That's true.
And
I'm a very lazy painter.
That's, I think, a huge thing, because I think this is all great stuff, and I'm going to try it on those 1 or 2 models that you open it up and you go, oh, this guy.
That one. Yeah,
this guy. But so many people aren't striving for a Golden Demon. They just want to put their stuff on the table. But I think the huge value in this is you guys have so much information to offer that it's just those little things that people can start using, even if it's just figuring out the value and desaturation and what warm and cold colors mean, just to make those little minor changes in there. I think that there's a lot of value in that. Anyway, just wanted to interject that because I like to talk and you guys have been talking and I haven't had my turn.
I saw your ears smoking a little bit.
They were a little bit. I was having trouble.
The hamster wheel was just screaming, man. I could see it.
Yeah, I think one of my issues with painting minis is that constant struggle from 2D to 3D. And a lot of these concepts we're talking about with the lighting and your values and establishing that. But I mean, it doesn't have to be that complicated. It could be as simple as just, like I mentioned earlier, your color choices, complementary colors, to, kind of push that skill forward a little bit. I mean, and it really comes down to, as a individual, what looks good to you on the table. Mac likes just getting it on the table, 3 feet away. Hashtag ain't got time for that.
You got time for that.
Right, Mac?
Right.
No, but cool thing about it is you can just do like a Zenithal Prime, right? You can do it to a whole army at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And you do your basic paint jobs, it already looks good. It already looks better than, you know, what you have been doing before.
Right.
You just, it's one tiny effort. If you don't have an airbrush, you can do the same value sketching that we've been talking about with just a dry brush.
Yeah.
Vince Venturella, my favorite miniature blogger, just does that with, well, he talked about it doing with a dry brush before he paints. So he just like dry brushes the lighter areas on the model, then he puts paint on it, and it looks great. And it will especially look great if it's a whole unit, a whole army, especially from 3 feet.
Yeah. Yeah. See, now, how long have you been painting minis, Adam?
5, 6 years.
Okay. And what about you, Eric?
I don't know if I can count that far back.
Okay, that's fair. And Tanya, you just started. So,
April, yeah.
so
I
I'm going to
started in
say
April.
to you two guys, to you two master painters, Adam and Tanya, I want to say this. You guys have the luxury of YouTube. When Eric and I started painting, there was nothing. You either knew what you were doing or you didn't. Trying to figure out why your testers enamel paint.
Well, it was a lot of trial and error.
It was a lot
really.
of trial and error.
I mean, and
that's
still. Go ahead, Mac.
Well, I think it's great that there's so many resources out there, because you just mentioning the dry brush Zenithal. I do have an airbrush. I don't use it at all, and that's why I don't Zenithal Prime. But the next model I do, I'm gonna do exactly that with my dry brush, because I have 500 brushes on my desk.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say that people should try to challenge themselves, try
Absolutely.
something new, try these concepts and ideas, that we're talking about. Yeah, like I mentioned, I struggle still with the 2D to the 3D because I have that. I think one of the methods I like using is layering, and it is very labor intensive, where you just a little bit layer, a little bit layer, and like you mentioned, Tanya, the problem with these paints is they're transparent, so it takes forever to get that tone that you want. But that's the classic fine artist in me. It's hard for me to break from that kind of. I've been doing it for so long.
Right.
It's like second nature. So sometimes when you go to these new concepts, it is challenging. It is hard, but I totally urge people to try them.
And also, acrylic paint is really hard to blend with. It's hard to not create extra texture with every single brush stroke.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
That's why I like using oils. That's another secret.
You have to tell me how to use oils, because I have a whole studio full of oils. I have not succeeded with using them on miniatures yet.
Okay, it's
well, don't share it right now. I hear another episode.
Well, okay, cool.
Right.
Well,
I hear another episode.
But I will say this, that using oils on miniatures is cheat mode, and it will make your stuff trying to blend with an acrylic, unless you're willing to sit down and spend time glazing and feathering and potentially building up that texture, because every time you raise your brush, that little dab is going to leave a texture, whether you see it or not. But with oils, you can say you want to do non-metallic metal gold. You sketch on your dark, you sketch on your midtone, you sketch on your highlight, and you just take a brush and and it feathers, and it does it like magic.
Well, I would say this about oils too, just briefly, is the guys in the modeling community, not miniature modeling. I'm talking about World War II, World War I, that are building models, airplanes, tanks, and stuff. They've been using oils for forever. I on some of my, when I was still playing 40K, on a lot of my vehicles, ironically, oil paints are great for oil effects, like leaking oil on vehicles, rust effects, and things like that. And that community, the RC community as well, has been using oil paints in conjunction with their acrylics for a long time. So check some of those out. I don't have a particular YouTuber off the top of my head that does it, but I've watched quite a few of them in regards to, particularly on tanks and Jeeps. They've been doing that for a long time.
Well, the trouble is, tanks, airplanes. It's a lot of flat surfaces, which are pretty big. We're talking about miniatures that most surfaces are very curved and they're very tiny. So every single brush stroke there is so visible.
Yeah.
It's like you don't see it. You take a picture on the phone, then you see it, right?
Yeah, and then you're like, oh no, I can't show anybody this. This is awful.
Just send it to me.
I know. I was trying to paint white the other day when I was working on Lady Olander. I actually took my oil paints and started doing like all of the subtle hues and values. It looked great. I took a picture and I saw all of the brush strokes. I hated it instantly. I had to wash it off.
Well, see, that's part what I won't go too much into oil because that's another episode, right, Mac?
Yeah.
But painting white with oils, there's never a brush stroke. It's smooth and buttery. And Tanya, if you've painted with oils, then you know how they're especially the ones that are formulated for working with miniatures. There's a company called Abtalung 502, and they have a less linseed oil content. So they're able to dry.
So they're richer in pigment, basically.
Richer in pigment. They dry much faster, and they're very easy to work with. It's night and day.
Thank you so much.
Adam, you just gave me a new description. Buttery. I'm using that now. Man, that's buttery, Mac.
That's buttery.
Yeah, that's buttery. That's what we'll call the oil episode. Painting your miniatures buttery.
All right.
I mean, I don't know what's your problem with the word. I mean, it's been used by like miniature painters. I mean, I watched pretty much everything on YouTube, I think. Well, or close to everything. I hear using buttery referring to paint consistency all the time.
Yeah. But it just sounds good. Just sounds good.
It's accurate. It's a very good term.
It is accurate.
Well, Mac, did you have any other ideas that you wanted to bring up?
I don't. I'm just sitting here trying to listen and learn. Because I'm mostly here as I don't want to say less experienced because I have far more experience, but because mine has been a process of, learning from nothing. I never even painted. I didn't do canvas painting or anything. I drew a lot. I used to do pencil sketches and ink sketches with my Itoya pens, but never any kind of color, never any kind of painting. The extent of my watercolors is the little books that come with the paint attached to the side that you get your brush wet. Yeah, you get your brush wet and paint it on there, and it turns into basically a big wet piece of paper with a little bit of color on it. Though that's the extent of that. So I'm listening because obviously I haven't had the opportunity to see one of Tanya's miniatures in person yet because COVID's messing us all up. But
I can throw some in your mailbox.
There you go.
Okay, that works for me. That works for me. But I have seen your guys's before, and Eric's. Yours are fantastic too. I mean, we're here talking to you guys because we're the hosts of the show. But I think people can get very discouraged because they'll
overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed by the number of models sometimes, but more discouraged because you see people out there painting this upper level stuff. Stuff that is just the Golden Demon, the Slayer Award, all of these amazing paint jobs. And I think that's something that every painter should strive for, but there's a level of talent that goes in. I think you always challenge yourself to the next level. So you always strive for the next level, and eventually you get to where you're happy. That's the most important thing. Yeah. But you should always strive and challenge yourself to the next level because like right now, I'm perfectly content with the way my models look. I love how my models look. I love putting them on the table. I'm not embarrassed to take them places. Nobody should be. I tell people all the time, I tell my kids when they paint with two colors and they're all still wet, the colors when they put the next color on, the only person has to like your model.
That's wet blending.
You're right. Kind of. It's kind of wet blending. I'll show you some. It's kind of wet blending. But you're the only person that has to like your model. But you should always challenge yourself to the next level of whatever you're doing. And like I said, I'm perfectly content with how my models look. But I'm really excited about, number one, the class that you're going to do, Tanya, because I'm excited to learn something more. I'm excited about the dry brush zenithal, the hand sketching for the value of different light sources. I fully intend on messing that up on a model 4 or 5 times. I'm excited because I'm excited about trying those things. And I think if nothing else that people take out of this, aside from the little tips you guys have thrown out there, is that you always strive for the next level, but you don't have to be disappointed with what you're doing. Even if hopefully my son won't throw me under the bus, but I have one of his here. Now, this is only for you people watching on video. It's very simple, but it's a million times better than the first model he did, because like you said, Tanya, he wasn't wet blending on that one. He waited for the paint to dry before he put the next one on. So he's learning, and just like him, for us, it's the same thing. You just keep learning and you just keep striving. And if you want to go for the golden demon, you keep upping it. If you don't, because you just want him to look good on the table, you send him to Adam and have him paint them for you.
So here's my 2 cents on that. I want to learn new ways to do the same techniques,
Right?
because you can call it this, or names and terms can all have fancy things, but when you unlock the next level in your own mind and you paint, the term thrown around the miniature painting community is paint bravely. Don't be afraid to make a mistake, because everybody is going to paint a miniature and it's going to look pretty bad, and it happens. And if that discourages you, then okay, I'm not going to try this technique again because I suck so bad at it. No, that's when you got to push through. And it's just that one technique. There are 20, 30 different ways to do something.
Well, it's basically like any skill. It takes practice.
It does. Otherwise it's called skill atrophy. If you have skill atrophy, or you decide, okay, I'm not going to practice doing non-metallic metal because I did it that one time and I got my own feelings hurt, and now I'm going to live in those feelings, you'll never break through because you're your own barrier at that point. And so I had a friend, and it's still a friend, and he's in a band, and hey, what did you think of this band's record? He's like, I don't listen to any other music but my own because I don't want anything else to influence me. And it took me a minute to think, and I'm thinking, wow, I could apply that to my own painting. It's okay to observe other people's work, but then to strive to be like them, I think almost sells yourself short. You should carve your own path, if that makes sense to you guys. You could observe them, but like, I don't want to paint like them. I want to paint better. Yeah, well.
You want to paint like you.
Exactly.
And that level continues to change. But I think with this particular discussion, one of the important things to remember is it's a hobby. And it's like what you said at the beginning, Tanya. You don't want to spend that much time on the model because then you're not having fun anymore. And regardless of your paint level, when you're painting models, there's people that are doing commission work, but it's a hobby. This is something that we do, or at least that I do, and I know that Eric does, and you, Adam, and Tanya, to relax. It's something fun. It's an adventure in painting to see what something likes. No, you don't do it to relax.
I paint angry.
It's to see what something looks like going from a bare metal model because you cracked it open in the box and you're like, wow, that's really cool looking. And I've seen a dozen really cool paint jobs on it. I want to see what I can do. And I want to have fun.
You want to bring that little dude to life.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm the biggest advocate of hobby cheatings because, I feel that it's really important for people to still have fun.
Yes.
Because as we said, it's a hobby. We're not doing it to compete with everybody.
Nope.
We're doing it for, our own fun. And so if I will take every single possible shortcut to get to a cool looking result, and I think that the reason why I want to, do the class is that in the practical part of it, I want to explain to people how to do this fun, shortcuts. and how to make the same job much faster and much easier. And one thing that I wanted to switch conversation to is that you said when you were like in 90s learning things. So I came across a very old book about painting Citadel miniatures. And it's just an amazing source of knowledge that's very commonly overlooked. Basically, back in time when Citadel did not have a vast range of paints, it explains you a lot of stuff. It explains you how to make your own washes, how to make your own, what's basically a contrast paint is. And, you know, now you buy it straight out of jar, but you can just open the book, use the recipe, and mix it from the paints that you already have. And I want to integrate that to the class because, you know, if I start teaching people how to, you know, mix a proper color for shades, I also want them not to paint all of the shades and recesses by hand, but be able to mix their own shade color that they're going to use.
Yeah. I recall that book vaguely. And back in those days, the really cool Citadel stuff was only available in the UK. That was where a lot of the struggle was for painters in the late 80s, early 90s, is the UK, man. They had it. I was active duty military at the time, and if you played games, you wanted to get stationed overseas just so you could get some of the stuff from Games Workshop because you couldn't get it over here. So that was the goal. It was like, oh, you just came back from Mildenhall Air Force Base? What did you buy from GW? So, wasn't what did you do while you were over there? Did you see Big Ben? No.
It was the same thing because I grew up in Russia, and you know my like first boyfriend ever was a big fan of Games Workshop, and this is how I was like basically around people who paint miniatures all my life, but I never wanted to do it because it takes so much effort and so much time. It's like only until recently when I discovered that I can do it fast, that was appealing. But in Russia, it was almost like you described for a very long time, because even like 5 years ago, there were very few vendors that would sell Games Workshop stuff. So people would actually have to go overseas and bring stuff with them in their, you know, suitcases. And so
that's what it was like back in the 90s.
Back in the day.
In early 2000s, yeah, it was pretty much all of that was like that. And I think a lot of people went into, you know, high-end painting because they just didn't have that many models to paint.
Yeah.
They're like, you paint your army, yes, but then you have maybe another half of the year until you get another unit of Space Wolves. So you have plenty of time to just edge highlight it.
Yeah.
Perfectly.
Absolutely. All right, Eric, what else you got, my friend?
Well, I think we touched on a lot of color theory. I think we mentioned one thing I wanted to touch on real quick before we get out of here is color harmony and contrast. I know I'd mentioned contrast early in the talk, and basically these are ideas that I think it's simple idea people can think about is harmony is through similarity. So you have colors that are similar will help kind of make your models, you know, pop. You know, it could be just a different value, different tones of one color. You know, it could be your warm reds, and then you alter it just a little bit. And then the other thing would be contrast. So that's basically your conflicting colors. You know, you got your reds and green. They still kind of go together, but just because of the nature of them on that color wheel, they force it apart. So it'll make whatever you're painting pop.
I can't paint any miniatures red and green because all I can think about is Christmas colors.
Well, okay, so here's your red and green hack, okay? Say you want to do a red cloak. So you have like a Blood Angel, right? Red cloak. If you take a little bit of green, mix it into that red and into your shadows, and you go deeper and deeper green, it won't look green, but that red will be brighter because your mind's eye sees it differently because of the red the green's desaturating the shadow and therefore elevating your red to a higher contrast.
Yep.
That's the trick with contrast. You want to put, with miniatures especially, you put your brightest bright next to your darkest dark. That's how you, I mean, from 10 feet away, it just pops.
Yeah. Yeah. They naturally are fighting against each other. So
You're making my brain hurt.
Well, that would happen anyway.
Well, they are just like basically bashing everything together, but I want to separate those. There is a contrast of values. So, you know, your dark is dark next to your lightest lights. And then there's a contrast of temperature. So cold colors go together with warm colors, or colors that are opposite from each other on a color wheel, you know, go together, so for maximum difference between them. And so you can tweak all of these parameters in all of the different ways, because you can have colors of the same value, because they're not dark or they're not light, they're like mid-tone, but with two very different temperatures, you would still see maximum difference between them.
Exactly. So I did to what she was saying, perfect. I did a wolf pelt, and I undercoated that wolf pelt in like a sky blue, cold blue, and the fur itself was like a lemon yellow, and they were both the same value, but because they were opposite ends of the temperature spectrum, it just visually it was very catching, you know, versus instead of just like painting it like a cream color and then having a brown in the shadows,
Right.
you know, getting away from just the standard sort of thing. And it's little tricks like that don't take advanced skill. You know, once you understand color value and temperature and you know, kind of what we're talking about, you can basic level paint anything to just look better than the skill that you put into it.
All right. Very good.
Yeah, that's really good stuff, guys. I mean, that's good enough that I'm going to try new stuff. And I'm an old dog. I don't like new tricks. But I'm excited to try some stuff. I might do more with my color wheel now than just let it sit next to me on the desk.
There you go.
That'd be rather exciting. But I
thought you just spun the wheel like Jeopardy or Wheel of Fortune.
I just spin it on top of my desk like when I'm thinking about something. But when I'm thinking about something, it's not usually saturation and value. It's what am I going to build this toilet paper roll into for a piece of terrain. So
there you go. That's fun.
More stuff like that for me, as I'm far more of a terrain builder than I am miniature painter, as we can see by all the terrain sitting behind you, Adam. Most of that looks like stuff I brought to Discover.
Yes, it is. It was all set up for 40K. What is the big game? Armageddon or Apocalypse? Apocalypse. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, you got anything else, Eric, or shall I take us out?
No. Did you guys have any closing thoughts on color theory before we get out of here? I mean, there's lots of resources. We mentioned YouTube and online that people can check out.
Well, I wanted to add, like, if you want to buy yourself a color wheel, you may end up never using it like Mac did. That's because, you know, there's plenty of images in the internet that you can use. There's also multiple different color wheels, but what color wheel in a physical form does is makes you look like a legit serious artist. Everybody who walks into your studio or your hobby room or on your desk, I see like so much miniature painters have a color wheel on their wall, and like you don't use it in your work like that. So, but it does make you look legit.
Dude, I look legit. I didn't even buy mine. Mine came free with my Green Stuff World order. I bought the color shift paints. But well, I want to say thank you guys both for joining us. I really appreciate it. I think this was a really great episode. We're gonna put it out there so people can check it out and hopefully learn some stuff. So Facebook and Podbean land for us. Remember, you can check out this video on not the video, but the audio on Podbean. You can check out the video on our CoastalCon YouTube channel. We'll also post links in the CoastalCon Facebook group, which you can go over and join that. And you can also check us out on the Indie Invasion Facebook page. And as always, you can find us on Podbean, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iTunes, Pocket Cast, iHeartRadio, and Stitcher. So we are all over the place in the podcast world. But you can also find us now on Patreon. We're going to be starting up a Patreon here shortly if you would like to support Indie Invasion in our rabid obsession for independent game developers.
Yeah, supporting them.
Supporting them. That's what we're doing. We have lots more interviews lined up with lots more independent game developers, and as always, we'll still be working on our Twisted Talk Phantom Dice segments. So talking about new independent games that we find, independent games that we love. And if you guys know of any independent games out there that we think we should check out, you can shoot us an email at indieinvasion@gmail.com, or you can throw a message up on the Facebook page. You can throw it up on the YouTube channel. We'll find it somewhere because we'll see that little red notification up there. If you're listening to this on Podbean, don't forget to follow us so you can get updates on whenever we're doing new episodes, whenever we post anything new. And if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to click the like button, subscribe, and hit that little notification button up there in the corner so that you can find out also when we post new stuff. And as always, when we're heading out, whenever you throw your games on the table, remember to prepare yourself for the invasion.
Thank
See you later, guys.
Take it easy.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us for that awesome chat with Adam and Tanya. We're going to have the video up obviously on YouTube because that's where you're watching it right now. We'll also throw it up on Podbean in just an audio version. But we wanted to let you know that we're going to be doing several more of these videos on different things about painting techniques, color values, all that kind of stuff that I had no idea what they were talking about. But they're going to be doing a lot more stuff with us and several more videos. And what we're going to do is we're going to put those videos up on our Patreon page. So if you would like to become a patron for the Indie Invasion podcast, we would love to have your support to continue to bring you really great content. We're going to bring you great content whether you join or not. But what that'll get you for joining and becoming a patron of the Indie Invasion podcast is early access to those videos. They're still going to be available a couple of weeks after we release them on Patreon. But if you would like early access to them, check us out. You can pop over to our Patreon. I'll throw a link up in the description. And we really appreciate you guys joining us for this. And hopefully you guys learned as much about color theory in this one as I did, and that we can learn a lot more together. And remember, no matter what, prepare yourself for the invasion.